Welcome back, philosophy students, to today's Explainer. Now, we aren't just doing a standard text analysis today. Instead, we're essentially conducting a grave, theatrical autopsy of the human psyche. We're stepping right into a very dark, allegorical Gothic fable to examine exactly what happens when we completely tear down the mind's architecture, but forget to bring a blueprint to rebuild it. So prepare yourselves, because the reflection we're about to look into, it's incredibly unforgiving.
Okay, let's dive into this syllabus drawn straight from the Codex of the Gilded Hollow. First, the frameless void mirror, then truth versus illumination, the surgeon and the knife, the terrifying birth of the Red Judge, and we'll wrap up with the path of reconstruction. It's a complex Nietzschean landscape, so let's get right to it.
Section 1. The Frameless Void Mirror, a bureaucratic tribunal of self-examination.
I want you to picture this incredibly stark, grimdark Gothic setting. You have the bureaucratic precision of a tribunal clashing with the absolute ceremonial pomp of a high judge in his full robes. But right in the center sits this mirror, a freestanding monument in stark, monochromatic gray. And its very first revelation is simply no frame. The reflection it offered totally refused the dignity of a border. It didn't hang safely on a wall. It stood freestanding, brought in under the guise of this grand judicial ceremony of self-examination. No dignity. When the high judge actually stood in front of it, the mirror stripped away all of his decorative language. That heavy collar of accumulated law? Gone. The imposing wig of precedent that had concealed his truth for decades? Vanished. It offered him absolutely nothing ceremonial to hide behind. Only the raw core. See, the absolute horror of the void mirror was that it couldn't lie. It was completely passive. It exposed a purposeless, hollow desire beneath those robes. There was no noble pursuit of justice there, no real desire to protect the innocent. There was literally only a craving for the raw sensation of the gavel's descent. The mirror only showed what was already present.
I have stripped your altar, Your Honor. Pray to the void. This is the jester, watching the entire scene unfold from behind a stone column. And notice, he's not triumphant. He is satisfied, in that cold, calculating way of someone who just executed a flawless procedure. This really establishes the jester's pure Nietzschean nihilism. He watches his surgical precision pay off, perfectly content to just leave the altar bare.
And then we get the high judge's realization. The gavel falls not for justice, but because the silence is deafening. If we do a quick philological deep dive here, this exposes the complete hollowing out of his institutionalism. The language of justice is dead. We're looking at the absolute horror of a man confronting his own exposed, unfiltered core, desperately just trying to fill the deafening silence of a completely meaningless existence. Section 2. Truth versus illumination. Stripping the altar versus building the path. And this brilliantly illustrates the core philosophical conflict of our fable. I really want to warn you right now against the seduction of nihilistic deconstruction. It looks like liberation, but it's a trap. Look at the dichotomy. Truth is a clinical act. It's a forensic revelation of rot, a passive mirror of the past and present that just strips facades away. Illumination, however, is a creative act. It requires a vision of reconstruction, the actual fire of transformation, and that arduous mountain path of self-overcoming. Truth is forensic, but illumination is life force. You need illumination to actually survive the truth. Section 3. The surgeon and the knife. The jester's fatal flaw. Right, so here is the major pivot of our tragedy. The jester really viewed himself as a philosophical liberator, but his methodology was fatally flawed. Let's walk through this surgeon analogy. Step 1. Diagnose the rot. Step 2. Remove the wrong organ with perfect technique. Step 3. Abandon the open cavity. The jester successfully deconstructed the ego. He wielded truth like a scalpel, right? But he stopped there. He just gave the gaping wound air and falsely, dangerously, called it healing. Which leads me to ask you this directly. What grows in the cavity left behind by the deconstructed ego? I mean, really pause and think about the psychological tension here. What happens to a human mind when you completely clear the ground of all its structures and beliefs, but offer absolutely no creative path forward? Section 4. Birth of the Red Judge, the inferno of purposeless reaction. Imagine that stark, monochromatic void we talked about earlier suddenly shattering. Jarring, violent reds just flood the vision. The superego has been destroyed, and the unchained id is now awakening. So the crucial point is this. The red judge is the direct consequence of failed self-overcoming. He's a machine of pure retribution, born from truth being shown without the fire of transformation to follow it. When the psyche is merely cleared out by the surgeon's knife and not actively rebuilt, primal ressentiment, pure vengeance, ascends without any impediment whatsoever.
Section 5. The path of reconstruction. Avoiding the accelerant.
So, it's time to shift our tone from the grim warning of this Gothic fable to the necessary, life-affirming architecture of constructive philosophy. How do we survive the revelation of the void mirror? We survive through the creative architecture of the self. We need the fire of transformation, a solid vision of reconstruction, and the sheer will to actually rebuild. We have to sublimate that exposed, raw core into a higher form of becoming. Because a deconstructor who lacks these ingredients isn't a liberator at all. They are merely an accelerant to the inferno. I'm going to leave you, my fellow students of philosophy, with this final provocative thought. When you finally look into the mirror, will you merely clear the ground with truth? Or will you use the fire of illumination to build the Übermensch upon it? You have to embrace amor fati, the love of your fate. Seeing the void is literally only the first step. Building a masterpiece over it is the work of a lifetime. Keep questioning, but more importantly, keep building. See you next time.